Great, Chris, having you here. We're super excited for this conversation about using data to drive decisions. And would love to just start out if you want to give a few more sentences on your background and then get into our first question on how you use metrics when you're fundraising for data sign.
Okay, my first question, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, okay, good. Yeah, cool, great. Yeah, well, nice to meet you all. Great to be speaking to you today. It's a real privilege to be able to speak to a room full of smart founders. It's like my favorite thing to be doing. So yeah, I understand it's like I think the first day of the program, so you have lots of fun stuff ahead of you. I'm sure it's going to be information overload, but yeah, you're founders, right? So you're used to that. Yeah, so my name is Chris. As Anne said, I was the CTO and co-founder at DataSign. So it was a UK startup that was founded in 2016. So we were a B2B SaaS platform using AI. We called it machine learning back then because that was the trendy phrase at the time. And we helped creative people in marketing to make data-driven decisions about their ads. So actually, yeah, I can talk to you about kind of being data driven in how you run your business, but that was also the thing that we offered to marketing teams. My background is that I am a data guy, so I studied physics, but also machine learning, which is lots of stats. So I love nerding out about tech and data. Um, so with DataSign, from when we founded, we had a 5-year journey as we scaled through to exiting to Shutterstock in 2021. I spent about 3 years there. I established and grew out their generative AI department and the products that they still currently have in market, including as like the world's first artist compensating AI image generator, lots of other cool stuff as well. Before I was the founder, I worked as a software engineer and data scientist for a bunch of companies in and around London, including Ocado and the BBC. Yeah, and today I'm back in the startup game, working on something new, very very stealth at the moment, still just kind of exploring, but yeah, an exciting time to be building, I think. So happy to be back at it.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. We're super excited. So, we'd love to start with just understanding, you're a data guy and how you used the metrics that you were tracking in investor conversations and what were those metrics that you were focused on.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think of it is like your goal as a founder, right, is to build an engine that's going to allow you to grow your business. And when you're talking to investors about fundraising, you want to be able to present that clearly to them, but in a way where they can understand, like if they pour money into one end of that engine, then at some point they have a good chance of making a return later on. So I think for me, really, like any discussion around the metrics that you're sharing with investors is starts with a discussion around what metrics are you tracking for yourself? Like how do you measure your own progress and success as a business? And that's like at a macro level, but also at a micro level. So with being quite a nerdy startup, we tracked a lot of different things, and generally had, I guess, a philosophy of like capturing as much data as we could so that it was there to analyze and delve into when we would find it useful. So obviously, like it's important that all founders understand their financial metrics. So revenue, cash flow, burn rate, runway, whatever is relevant for you as a business. But then I think after that point, it starts to become quite specific to how your business operates. So like we were B2B and we were primarily selling to like larger customers. So we had quite a long sales cycle. So like the way that we measured the health of our sales pipeline was by how many names we had on it and like what level of progression we had of different discussions, because we knew we'd have to have sort of 4 to 6 discussions with any customer before they would actually get their credit card out. But if we were B2C, that would be a completely different set of metrics, right? We were a product company, so we were building a SaaS platform. So we had a product team and a sort of tech team that was a mixture of engineering and data science, and so used a lot of the different metrics for kind of tracking how those teams worked, how we captured learnings, how we improved our product over time, and like everything else, like obsessing about like our Glassdoor rating for HR and recruitment purposes because that was really important as the team was growing. So there's like data you can have about your business all the way through. I think as like the founder or as a CEO, when you step back and you're trying to set the direction for the company and to measure how you're succeeding against the thing that you're trying to achieve, it's good to boil that down into something that's a bit more manageable because it's really easy to end up with numbers that are kind of going in all different directions and not really have a good read of what's going on. I think like our metrics changed over time, but I think we always had a revenue metric that we were tracking. It was normally MRR for us. It could have been different at different times and for different companies, but kind of monthly revenue for us was the key. Recurring revenue, particularly, was kind of the key measure of like the financial health of the company. And then in terms of like what we were actually trying to accomplish, we changed a bunch of times, but we ended up boiling everything down to a single kind of North Star metric that we used, which is going to be super technical for anyone who doesn't know how digital advertising works, but it was basically the total return on ad spend that all of our customers got. So that was like if we had 10 customers and they each spent 100K on Facebook ads and they made 50K back from it in sales, then multiplied that number by the total number of customers, and that was the number that we tracked. So that's a number that like went up as we got more customers. It went up as our product got better because our customers' ads got better over time as well. And we liked it because it described like how successful we were as a business, like what value we were actually delivering to our customers. So that's a number that we spent a bunch of time deciding on what we would track. And then it became one that we were happy to share with investors. The one thing I'll say is like, particularly once you have investors on your board, or if you're going to have repeated conversations with kind of external parties, so even if it's kind of potential investors that you're going to be speaking to over a longer period of time, once you start using a number, it can be awkward to stop using it. So like the promotion of a metric from like an internal one up to one that you're talking about externally is something that I would advise being careful about doing. But that's kind of the one that we settled on.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really helpful point there, Chris. I think it'd be super helpful to hear about. It sounds like you guys were capturing a lot of data when you first started and still, how do you kind of go from tracking all of those metrics in the beginning to narrowing it down on the key metrics and ending up at that North Star metric? And then would love to hear about the decision-making process of elevating that metric from internal to external.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not something that was separate from making decisions about what we were doing as a business. So, over a 5-year journey, we pivoted a few times. We pivoted customer base, we pivoted our product offering a bit. And so as that happened, our focus of what we were trying to accomplish shifted. Like initially we kind of did our early R&D in a much more let's say kind of like consultative kind of way. So working very closely with partners, having like me and my team like on site with some of our early customers so that we could build out the tech with them. The metrics for what that looks like as a successful business are totally different to one where we were scaling a SaaS solution. So we were measuring like how many customers do we have? How quickly can we turn around a project? Like how well are we capturing the learnings? Are we then able to keep those customers as kind of recurring revenue customers? And as we kind of shifted and changed and moved to being a slightly different shape of that engine of the business, naturally the focus of what the company is doing like day to day, not the long-term focus, hopefully that's relatively constant, but like how we're getting to that point on the horizon as that changes, it was important to update kind of the way we were tracking those metrics to match that. So our North Star changed a bit over time. The one that I talked about is kind of where we ended up because that's the business that we sort of scaled through to exit. But it changed a bunch along the way. Um, yeah, maybe there's another part of the question that I skipped over.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And how did you, beyond just tracking the metrics and how the metrics shifted, how did the data you were collecting and the metrics you were tracking help shift your decisions to evolve the business over time?
Right. Yeah. So I think um, like I have a natural bias as someone who's like studied stats to like I don't like making blind decisions, right? So it's unlikely when you're making decisions about your business that you can have them entirely driven by data, and you probably shouldn't be doing that. You have a reason that you're running the company that you're running, and you have a thing that you want to accomplish with it, and some bets that you've placed, and um, those are important factors in driving the decisions that you make. But personally, my view is like the more that you know and the more data is on the table, the more informed the decisions that you can take are. There's a hierarchy from like data to information to insight to action, right? As you uh, um, even a small company will generate volumes and volumes of data, and you shouldn't be spending all your time sitting there looking at it. But like pulling out things that are important that tell you about either the health of your overall business or how different parts of the business are working and how well they're connecting to each other. Those are numbers that I think are useful when you're having, say, a leadership discussion, or if you're even if the leadership discussion is inside your own head, if you're a solo founder, and it's like super early, like grounding how you're thinking about how well your business is doing and therefore what changes you should make in data. For me personally, I think that it's very risky not to do that. Um,
So I'm going to jump in with a quick question for our founders. Since it's our first session today, I'm really curious, how many people feel like they have a North Star metric that they're confident is the correct North Star metric for their business? If you do feel like you have that, do, I don't know, maybe like a heart emoji or something. And if you don't, feel free to put it in the chat. Also, if you want to put what you're focusing on in the chat too, that would be really helpful. And for those of you who are confused about what you should be focusing on during our Q&A, that's a great time to ask that question. Okay, I'll shut up. Michaela, back to you.
No worries. Awesome. Thank you, Chris. So, obviously being a founder can be overwhelming and then looking at all of that data and capturing it. So, did you have any platforms or tricks or tools to make that process of taking the data you were collecting and kind of making more efficient at making decisions about your business?
yeah, I think so. I kind of talked a bit about like data capture, and then I talked about metrics, and we we sort of accumulated ways of capturing data as the business grew. Maybe that was like HubSpot for sales data, Google Analytics for website traffic, like loads of stuff from like the product and kind of as much as possible, we tried to get quantitative data back from our customers as well. We were quite high touch with our customers, so we tended to speak to them more than say put thumbs up or thumbs down buttons on our product, but like wherever we could capture like signals of customer intent, like so all these different kind of sources flowing in. I think the real value is when you synthesize those into one place. I'll be honest, like we mostly used spreadsheets. Like I really love spreadsheets. It's a tool that is like easy to use if you're using a platform like Google Sheets. It's very easy to share and collaborate. It's something that everybody knows. And one of the challenges with data, and this extends outside of running a business, but like as a practitioner of data science, like one of the challenges that you often have is like the inaccessibility of sharing data. So if you have insights and data that would be helpful to members of your team, then I think having in a tool that everyone knows and understands is great. Spreadsheets is like a nice default option for that. There are a bunch of more sophisticated platforms out there that you can use. I think I was always scared that whenever you try to replace a tool that you're using, you just end up with one extra tool. So to some degree, like keeping things simple with something that everyone used we found helpful. Um, it's a slightly boring answer, sorry.
Spreadsheets are great. I'm a big fan. And so going back, because I know a lot of our founders are maybe pre-revenue, were there key kind of top of funnel or leading indicator metrics that you really focused on in the beginning of starting your business?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, in fact, I talked about that kind of early R&D phase of the business, but once we moved past that into kind of a more pure self-serve SaaS play, the first product that we launched was a free product. So it was, uh, by definition, a period of the business that had effectively no revenue, apart from a few kind of legacy customers. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a whole suite of kind of standard metrics that you can pull from there. I think it comes down to like what are you trying to accomplish as a business, and then what's the number that will tell you if you're accomplishing that. So for us, we'd launched a free version of our product because we wanted to get a bit of word of mouth. We wanted to get feedback on the product that we had. We wanted to get signal on what features would be most impactful for our customers for us to develop next. And so we picked 2 or 3 metrics that helped us with that. For us, it was important that the product was something people would be using every day. So we looked at daily active users versus later on as we built out more into enterprise customers and kind of marketing agencies, the cycle time on advertising there is a lot slower. It's more campaign based. So we switched to tracking kind of monthly metrics because we found that that was more indicative of how much customers were actually coming back to the platform to do the thing that we wanted them to do with it. But early on, it was daily, so we tracked that. And then we looked at like penetration within the same company. So if somebody signed up for an account and were playing around with it, were they recommending it to other people who were colleagues? Looking at email addresses, like looking at LinkedIn, trying to find like, okay, are people actually like recommending this to their network, to people that they know? Yeah, and so I think there's lots of stuff that you can do, even if you're pre-revenue, and even when you have revenue, there's still important stuff happening at the top of the funnel. Like as long as you're growing, you need to have people discovering you somehow, and there's going to be certain channels that's happening through. And although ultimately, if you have a funnel that's like whatever, like a website, and then people come to a form, and then you email them, and then you have a meeting with them, and then you get them to sign, the thing that you care about is the conversion at the end of the funnel. Um, like I would say, there's always value in looking the whole way up the funnel, and particularly when you're thinking about, say, you're changing your website design, and you want to do that because you want a more engaging brand that's going to drive more conversion. The thing that the website is actually going to do is make people more likely to click on stuff and stay on your website. So look at the top of the funnel metrics there, like see how that is having an impact. Also look at like how that flows down through the tunnel. But I've spoken to a lot of people who I think forget that. There was a mantra that I heard a lot of people kind of being very focused on conversion. It's like, no, the only thing I care about is conversions. Like, as someone who's running like an advertising platform, where it's like, yeah, we can change like the background color or the picture or the stock image that you're using in your ad, and that'll make it more effective. And we would say it will affect the click-through rate. And they'd be like, no, 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 I just care about the conversion. It's like, yeah, but if you want people to convert, they need to click and go through your funnel, and this is the bit that we're changing here. So it's always good to have an awareness of like what's happening, as like how people discover you as a brand and as a company, and then follow them down through and understand like where the dropping off points are.
Yeah, that's super helpful and agreed. I think, once you grow as a business and gather more data like revenue and stuff, it can be easy to lose sight of that. When you were fundraising, did you find that beyond kind of the basic revenue and other financial metrics, that there were certain ones that investors were really focused on?
Yes, and it varied from investor to investor. So, some all investors will care about the financial health of the company. That's kind of bread and butter. It's the business, and they want to be sure that you know how your finances work and that all the numbers are pointing in the right direction. You know what your runway and burn rate is and all of that stuff. That's very important. And like having a path to revenue growth is ultimately the thing that is going to make your business investable, because investors want that return, and they need a good return. They don't just need a lifestyle business. If you're raising investment as a startup, it's because they expect multiples on successful bets. So the financial stuff I think is universal, but then we're a specific business in a specific industry vertical, but we spoke to investors from very general technology investors to like super specific, like verticalized ones, and their expectations are different. The things that they care about are different. The level of expertise that a given angel investor or fund will have in an industry will vary. So they will care about different numbers more or less. We did have some investment from like strategic investment from industry companies, and they really cared about the stuff that we really cared about for knowing how the engine of the business worked. And I would say that the kind of more standard like institutional investors cared a little bit less. So it's good to just know all of that stuff and have materials that you can present if people are interested, and try to understand like what the focus of a fund or of an angel investor is, like what are they going to be interested in, and lead with that. If you know you have a number that's going to impress them that isn't revenue one, then make sure you tell them it. But yeah, it's just good to have that stuff in your back pocket.
Yeah, and going off that last point you said, as there are certain metrics that come naturally through your business, come externally through the industry you're in or from investors. How do you think about improving some of those kind of key metrics that you are focused on? And then how do you choose when to maybe shift or present another metric that portrays your business in a better light?
Yeah, this is always a fun dance, I think. Like the one of the things that, in my experience anyway, which is a caveat that you should hear from everyone who's talking about their like one successful business that they exited. But in my experience, one of the dances that you're constantly undertaking as a founder is you're trying to hide the level of chaos that is happening internally when presenting to the external world, right? And that's fine, and everyone has a founder, you know how uncertain things are, and that's normal. If you don't know that's normal, that's normal. It feels chaotic all the time, right? Part of what you're doing is providing like an edifice so that people who don't have very much attention to spend on your business are getting like a consistent narrative about what it is. It's like, oh, okay, you're a marketing AI startup, you have this amount of revenue, you raised this much money, this is the team size. Nice simple story. And then if they want to dig into it more, they can do. What was my point? I guess my point is internally our metrics were changing a lot. We would have different projects or initiatives where we'd be tracking different things. Okay, we're going to add this new feature to the platform. We have no idea if it's going to work. Fine. So we want to get it in front of customers as soon as possible. That team is now focused on fast iteration of a new product feature. So maybe we don't even care about customer feedback to begin with. We just care about how fast we can get it out. So it's like, okay, what's our cycle time on like new feature release? And like how much of the team's time is spent on like fixing bugs and stuff. Once it's out, don't care about that as much. Now we care about customer feedback and how quickly we can incorporate that and respond to it and get to a yes or a no on the feature. And like that stuff changes over time. So internally, like you can have a culture where you're data driven in everything you do, but by nature of stuff that's happening internally to your business will be more short term and changeable and specific to different problems. That stuff's going to change. That's why I say it's important to think about what you're talking about when you present stuff externally and kind of maybe hide some of the chaos a little bit.
And did you have any specific instances where there was a metric maybe that came more externally that you felt you needed to show to investors or customers that you were uncomfortable with, at a certain point, and how do you focus on improving that metric?
Um, I mean, I would say we shared some metrics externally that I regretted us having done. Like we shared with um as part of our journey as we pivoted, we talked a lot about the like the size of the brands that we had when we were like super enterprise focused for one phase. And our investors sort of fell in love a little bit with these like big ticket deals that we were getting. And we realized that there was a better opportunity if we went a little more down market, but to like a much bigger customer segment. And it definitely like we got a little stuck in the mud with our investors obsessing about this like average ticket size metric that we talked about. Where we're like, well, that's coming down, but we think it's a good thing, right? So maybe that, yeah, like a few instances like that is why I'm a little wary about saying what you should talk about. Wait, hang on. I feel like I've shot off on a tangent. Did I answer your question, Michaela?
Yeah, and in that example of maybe that was a shift from a metric, did you have one that you brought to investors, like it's going down, but it's bringing value in this way, and you brought a new metric to them?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have a specific example. I think we generally did a good job of um, taking them on that journey of like as changes happened and the business changed, our metrics would change with it. Um, I will say that, and this was true for investors that we had on our board, but also when we were talking externally about the business, we always lead with the narrative. Like, don't lead with a new metric. It's really easy to forget that you're spending all day every day thinking about your business and like what's happening today. But if you're speaking to someone that you last spoke to a month ago at the last board meeting or 3 months ago when they were like prospective investor, but the conversation didn't go anywhere or you weren't raising at the time, they like still have the view of the company that you had back then. And they may not real that people will just naturally not realize how quickly things can change. So it's important to like lead with the narrative and be like, well, we were doing that. That was great. We've now changed and we have this like exciting new growth area that we're pushing into. And try and avoid getting into the numbers on that stuff before they've accepted and digested the new story and to see if they're still interested in speaking to you. Because you as you can pivot into an investor's interest zone, you can also obviously pivot out.
I'm just going to jump in with one resource I want to share and then also a quick question. There's a company called Beehive, which I know now has got like a lot of buzz on Twitter or X and on LinkedIn. It's like a competitor to, I guess, like MailChimp and Substack. And the founder, he's made all of his investor communications public, and you can sign up for his newsletter, and then he'll send you all of the newsletters that he sent to investors over like a 3-year period where he's talking about metrics, and you can see like the narrative that he said and basically like the points where he was like, we were tracking this metrics and now we're not because of X, Y, and Z. Here's what we're focusing on now. And what's interesting in looking at those emails is after he said that in one email, he repeated that in like the next 6 monthly updates where he's like, as a reminder, we were tracking this. We aren't tracking X anymore because of X, Y, and Z. And it's kind of like a broken record on that. And I think like that's very much needed because investors aren't thinking about you 24/7 and they don't remember all of that. But like that's just like a really great live example of what you were saying, Chris, in case anyone wants to check that out. And I'll share the link of that later on today too. And then a question that I had was like, obviously you guys had an exit, and was there anything that through the exit process you learned or realized like in retrospect you wish you were doing, or if you weren't doing XYZ, it would have like shot you in the foot during the due diligence process and the exit? Like what can founders do now to prepare for that? Or is there anything they should be doing now to prepare for that?
Um, it's a good question. I mean, I'll say like the due diligence for our exit took like 3 months. It was pretty intense. During which time we are trying to still grow the business and trying to operate on the assumption that the acquisition might not happen. And we want to come out the other side of it having not, created our productivity and lost all our customers. And it can be a bit all-consuming, particularly if you're a small team. So I think like good bookkeeping, like having all your documents in order, like if your exit strategy, or if there's a chance that your exit might be an acquisition or whatever. I think any successful outcome for a startup, you're gonna at some point need to open up all your books and documents. So just like keep that stuff organized, have it in the back of your head all the time. Like we were really picky about making sure we read the licenses for all the open source like software that we use to make sure that we were allowed to do it. And then sure enough, as we were going through the DD on the acquisition, we found one library out of 700 that didn't have the right license, and we had to go in and like cut it out and like change a feature. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a specific answer that I can give to that end, but like just having the goal in the back of your mind and remembering why you're doing this, and making sure that you keep stuff in order, will make your life a lot easier further down the road. And it's that can happen with like investment rounds as well. Yeah. It's not just exit.
And maybe just a quick question off of that, Chris. How, as you know, when you're an early stage startup and there's not many of you on the team, how did you kind of set a process to take the data and metrics you're capturing and create like hygiene around that early on so you had that set up well for the future?
It's a great question, and I wish I had a good answer. I don't know. There's definitely, I think maybe it's something we took a little bit for granted because two of our founders were data people. Like me and one of my co-founders was like from a data science background, so it was kind of there. It was built into us like genetically, right from an early stage. We definitely, as we grew a little bit, we made some missteps where the team grew and we had people who came in who didn't have that as like an innate thing, that they just obsessively put everything in spreadsheets all the time. And so yeah, we then had to like establish some processes. I think a lot of that grew organically out of establishing like a reporting process. So say we bring in like a VP of marketing or whatever. Part of what we would want them to do as their job is like, you're going to run pretty independently. We're not going to be micromanaging you, but part of what you need to do is like report back to us with data on how stuff is going. That data is now part of your record keeping. You're seeing, you're sort of hopefully naturally capturing that stuff. If you have a data-driven culture from the top, then you'll naturally be asking for that data as you get further down the business, and it should hopefully spread. And yeah, obviously, like if it's important to you, then make sure that that's something that you're hiring for, because some people don't like doing that.
Awesome. And I think one kind of broader question before we switch over to Q&A. As an exited founder, what advice would you give to our first-time founders, and what were some of the biggest challenges you faced and throughout your process?
That's like 5 years of my life, so it's like it's hard to like separate that out entirely. Like one piece of advice is like be careful about listening to advice from people like me who have survivorship bias and a narrow view of the world. Obviously, I think it can be helpful to hear other people's stories as well. But remember, every business is different, and yours will be different. So be careful in how you interpret data and stories. I think one thing that was like a hard lesson that we've learned over and over, like as a founder, make time to think long term. Like you're trying to make your business successful, and it's really easy to just get dragged into trying to solve today's problems, but that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it to build the long-term thing, and you're the only person in the company whose job it is to really think that far out. So like every week, the busiest possible week when you have clients demanding this and investors and DD and whatever's on your plate, like just make sure you're making time for like thinking about the long-term strategy and don't get bogged down in the day-to-day. And strong opinions lightly held, I guess, which I would apply to how you think about data, but also just in general. Like whatever your current position is, whatever the current strategy is, whatever the data is telling you, it's like commit to that. Don't prevaricate or spend all your time navel gazing. Like do the thing, but be ready to change when data tells you the market changes or a product flops or an investor pulls out. Be ready to spin on a dime, but like when you're until that happens, like don't take your foot off the gas.
Perfect. We have Seth added a comment to the chat about what he's focusing on, and then I'm gonna kind of pull him up on the proverbial stage, and he's gonna like workshop his metric with you to decide whether or not it's the right thing for him to be focusing on. So I was gonna read your comment from the chat, Seth, but it actually might just be better if you kind of share a little bit about what you're doing, where you're at, what you're focusing on, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Hey, Chris. So we're building SaaS tools that really make it easy for non-technical SMEs to get the benefits of AI, saving time and money. And so, there's one very obvious metric for us, which is, tracking, because we can track all of our tools and every action they take, how much time it's saving, how much money it's saving, or how much money it's kind of making for the business. And so we're kind of planning to use that as our kind of North Star. And it's an unusual metric, right? It's not a typical SaaS metric, I don't think, but I feel like everything else will flow from that. It's how much value we're going to be giving to our clients. We can put it front of center on our website, and everything that we're doing, we can just ask that question of if it's going to help that, and yeah, if it's not, then don't do it. I'm wondering what you think about
that. I think it sounds great in principle. Maybe I'll ask a clarifying question or two. Like, how are you able to capture that data from your customers? Like, is it a feature of your platform that you will inherently know that, or is it something you need to ask them?
So it depends on the tool, right? So a lot of the stuff we're doing is revenue generating. Yes, we at the moment we're in that stage where we're doing a lot of consultancy. It's not really a true SaaS. So we know that from the setup, and we can program that in. For some of the planning that we've got, the tool will be asking, so the AI will be like, okay, so we've booked a call for you, and then after that call, it will follow up with the client and say, look, did you, I see that you made the phone call. We've tracked that. Like, did you get the deal? How much is the deal worth? And so it can track itself. So we don't need to do that as a human team. The AI can be doing that, and most of the time it will kind of get that info. So whether it's applicable across a task, like every time that task is done, we only need to ask it once. Or if it's a task like that where the value of it would change, then the tool can kind of ask that and track it itself.
Yeah, I mean, I would say try it, right? It's like, it sounds like you have a strategy for how to gather the data, how to track it, how to understand like what it means for your business. I also think, and maybe hearing it's like a little bit of a razor for decision making, a kind of will this make the boat go faster kind of metric, if you get that reference. I mean, I would kind of give the same advice I gave before, which is like I would track it internally and get to the point where like you're really happy that it's telling you the thing that you think it should be telling you before you start talking about it externally. But yeah, if that is measuring like the value that you're delivering to customers, is it a number that goes up as you grow your customer base? Probably not,
yeah.
Right?
So every time we get a new client or clients using the tool more, it obviously accelerates, and so we can track and feed that back to each client so they know how much value they're getting. But we can also add all of those numbers together, right, and have it as a ticker on the website, and use it as a sales tool.
I think it sounds good. It definitely sounds good as like a marketing tool. The only thing that I wonder, and you'll only know this by trying it, is one of the things that I think is important about a North Star metric, if you really kind of dig into the framework and read about it, is that like everyone in the business should be able to like pull a lever that changes that number. And I've definitely been in situations in the past where we had a metric that's like, well, if we can change this number, then it's really meaningful for the business. But if it's too detached from like what you're building or how you operate, then it can be hard for it to be actionable. So it's like a number that you just watch go up or down on the graph without knowing like how can we actually push it up.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's well aligned with what success for your platform and your business means. So I would say give it a go.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
This is going to be a really broad question, but as someone who's been in the AI ML space for a long time, long before it kind of became the word of the day,
10 years back when people used to ask me if it was robots, I was like, no, it's not robots.
I guess like what are the for founders who let's say they're building a SaaS product and it's not AI focused and they're getting a lot of pressure from investors saying like I want to only invest in AI software, like how are you using AI? What are the sort of easy steps that founders can take in understanding whether or not they should like build a tool in-house or just, start using available tools and like where are the common mistakes that you see founders making?
Um,
That's a super broad question. I realize.
no, it's a good question. It's like a bit of as someone who's been in the space for a long time, it's like a little bit of a pet peeve of mine that everyone claims that they're an AI company now, which I think isn't. It's both true and not true in a lot of cases. So there's the difference between it being a core part of your offering versus it being a way that your customers access the core part of your offering. And obviously, a lot of that is now becoming more commoditized, whether it's like like a speech like interface or a text like a chatbot interface. That was like a big undertaking or something that you would have to uh, um, yeah, in some cases it's like not possible a few years ago in terms of like a speech interface. So it's just now something that you can plug in. I'd be wary of like bolting AI onto your story in order to um, attract investors, but I do think it's important to. It's like a fundamental shift in the technology and business landscape. So burying your head in the sand and pretending it isn't there is also not a good idea. So I think understanding the trajectory of AI and how it's likely to commoditize stuff that is expensive today and how it's likely to raise like the level of interactivity that customers expect from different products and having a story for like how you're going to leverage that I think is important. Like if someone asks you like how does AI affect your business, like you should have a good answer, which might be, oh, it doesn't at all because actually the thing that we do is X and that's completely separate and then it won't be able to touch this because of regulation or data or whatever. Or, oh no, it's great for us because it means that this thing that's actually really time consuming for us to do, we can go faster with it now. Or we use it to automate this complex and expensive in-house thing, and now we can use AI so we can deliver value to customers quicker. I think there's a lot of ways that you can use AI without having to be an AI company, and like having a good answer on that is important.
And then another thing that like you've helped us a lot with is for early stage founders, like you're probably sitting on a lot more data than you realize. And whether or not that's data that you want to communicate to investors is like a totally different topic. But like let's just think about it in terms of, I guess, like customer insights or behavior. Where are the places that founders should look? Or like what's data that founders probably have but don't realize that they have?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I would say. I mean, if you have a product, you have a website that people are coming and visiting, there's going to be like what I would call behavioral data, like people interacting with your site, there's probably stuff there that you can dig into. Your email inbox is now full of data, and it's the kind of data that is easy enough to process and pull insights out of with a large language model that would have been much harder to do in the past, but also possible in your, and obviously, like if you're using the CRM, then that's going to be more richly kind of full of data. So, open rates, like which subject lines in your emails actually trigger people opening stuff, which ones they interact with, like all of that stuff. I think like capture everything, trust nothing is maybe the way to approach it. Like it's really good to have lots of data, but I also think it's important to remember that you can prove anything with statistics. So like whenever you're like kind of digging into that stuff, try to be like unbiased and dispassionate and just see what the data tells you. If you go digging around for data to try and prove a point, then you will undoubtedly find it, but there's probably also data that disproves it. Like you'll be able to prove anything regardless of whether it's true or not. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, we will wrap our session there unless anyone has any last minute burning questions. If not, stick around because we've got a few more program announcements. But I'll stop the recording and say, Chris, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of your data, metric, exit, founder knowledge. Very much